Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 24 in the book of First Timothy. Today's title is Results of Regarding Rightly. We're going to set our minds in a certain way today towards work, which then results in not reviling the name of the Lord and benefiting and blessing the body of Christ. All right, so the big topic is either bondservantness or slavery. Fortunately, the Bible addresses the topic of work and slavery and even servitude. Good thing, because about 1/3 of the audience of the time was either a bondservant or a slave. Probably no one listening today is a slave or a bondservant, and we all have Christianity to thank for that. So we'll get to that. So the question is, can this passage that has references either to slavery or bondservant, can it apply to us? So I refer you first to Philemon, the book of Philemon, in season 16. There's 5 episodes there where this topic of slavery and what is our major allegiance to, which is to the law of the Lord, and how it supersedes the imperfect law of man. So if you're curious on the topic, go back to season 16 and listen to those 5 episodes. The Bible here comments about servitude, but it's not the only place in the Bible that it talks about being a bondservant or a slave. So you have to go back to Exodus chapter 21, verse 5, where there's a limitation to slavery, where slavery is only allowed for 6 years, and then the slaves are released and people go free. However, if based on love, that is the love of a worker to a master, that person that has a 100% volition to bond themselves to their master. So the master brings the person before God and before a doorpost and marks that person, and that person is a bondservant forever. So slavery is the involuntary, usually lifelong servitude, and bondservant is the voluntary, lifelong servitude. So bondservants put themselves in bondservantness. Then in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 5 through 9, we learn about the posture of a bondservant, which should be that should be the same as you would to Christ. So render service with a good will as to the Lord. So the point there is, all the way through the book of Ephesians, is everybody submits to the Lord in some role, whether that's in the church, or wives to husbands, or children to parents, or citizens to a government. Everybody is involved in the act of being submissive. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 8 talks about bondservants. Be subject to your masters with all respect, not only the good and gentle ones, but also to the unjust ones. So there, we bring up the topic of unjust suffering, and then Jesus in the nuclear power plant of 1 Peter is used as the example of how do we handle unjust suffering. So bigger than economic systems, what we're going to be talking about today is this inward posture of a voluntary spiritual submission to the Lord that is demonstrated externally toward an imperfect world and imperfect people. So, in conclusion, with regards to the Bible talks about slavery and bondservants in a real way, both good and bad, in a repeated way. It's all over the multiple places in the Bible. Prioritizes relationships, and then this can be relatable to us. So here we are in 1 Timothy chapter 6, and let me read verses 1 and 2. Let all who are under a yoke as slaves regard their own masters as worthy of all honor, so that the name of God and the teaching may not be reviled. Those who have believing masters must not be disrespectful on the ground that they are brothers. Rather, they must serve all the better, since those who benefit by their good service are believers and beloved. So the first thing it mentions is that these people are under a yoke. That is, work is hard, toil, tired, striving. The Bible doesn't sugarcoat being a bondservant, and it doesn't sugarcoat work. The critical word, I think, in the whole passage is Let all who are under a yoke as bondservants, as slaves, that the Greek word is bondservants, regard their own masters. So that is to hold a view, to have your mind precede your actions, to let your mind lead the way, let your thinking guide your effort. So Christ does that first, and for example, with regards to sin, he regards sin as forgettable, sin as forgivable, and so he's the best example of regarding in a certain way. So Christianity is, in a lot of ways, a way of thinking and a way of setting our mind. Philippians, one of the whole themes of Philippians is that. So this points to something bigger than the economic system, and it points to something bigger than injustice in the world. So ultimately, the motivation for change in the world is going to be this change of our mind, the way that we regard this. So no matter what work you do so with a particular way of regarding. Work has a benefit. That's really good here. And one of the things we need to be aware of is the way we work is going to reflect on the name of God, that it can be honored or it can be reviled. So let's respect and honor and entrust interiorly. Let's do our job with regards to regarding. Let's do our job internally correctly so that externally, even in a bad and imperfect world, we can act as a witness. So here's a soundbite for today. All work is a witness of an internal reality. It can be done as a benefit to your spouse, to your family, to your church, to your restaurant, to your hospital, wherever work finds you. Work bears the name of God and should be honored and not reviled. So work in a way that the name of God is not reviled. And work bears this internal teaching, this truth, this worldview. So this truth ultimately elevates God's name and his church and his law and his kingdom. So everybody works in relationship to other humans. And the way that we regard others can affect the honor that God's name is given and God's teaching is giving. So let's regard correctly. Thanks for listening.